In this video, we're going to show you how to install the wheel bearing on your Hummer H3 located in the rear differential. With the vehicle raised and supported, I'm going to go ahead and rotate the wheel. I want to remove our center cap. So I'm going to use a screwdriver. You can use a trim tool, and you're going to go right behind here and just gently pry out, removing the center cap. Next, using a 19mm socket, I want to go ahead and loosen and remove your lug nuts. Go ahead and grab that wheel, remove it, and set it aside. Now with our wheel removed, we now want to go ahead and remove the caliper and bracket as one complete assembly. And this is going to come off with your brake pads as well. I'm going to come to the inboard portion here, and there are two 15mm bolts we want to go ahead, loosen, and remove. So I'm going to use my 15mm wrench and ratchet. You can use a breaker bar or your impact gun if you have something that'll fit in there. No, I remove the bottom one first. That way there I don't have to worry about the caliper sliding off on the top. We'll go ahead and remove this bolt, but you want to be sure to hold onto the caliper and bracket, just kind of keeping it from falling off. And the purpose of this is you don't want to have this pull off or fall off and cause undue stress to our flex hose, as you can damage the flex hose. With the bolt removed, we're now going to move this on top of our axle and support it over there. A tool that might be handy is a hanging tool or a hook tool. Before we do that, grab a lug nut and throw this on one of the studs here. When we remove our caliper and bracket, the brake rotor will be loose. You don't want that to fall off and hit the ground or hit you in the foot. Wiggle that caliper and bracket off. Swing that up. I'm going to go ahead and hang that there. That relieves any pressure off of that flex hose and keep that safe. Go ahead and remove that lug nut if you chose to do so. And then go ahead and grab that brake rotor and work that off. Now that we have our brake rotor off, our next step is to go ahead and pull out our axle. In order to do so, we need to move to the center differential area, remove that cover, and drain some fluid. Let's get to it. There's a series of 1/2-inch bolts all the way around the perimeter. And we're going to go ahead and loosen the top three and remove the remainder. Make sure you have a catch can underneath to catch differential fluid. Our bolts are a little bit rusted, so we do have to hammer these on a little bit. Now we have the three top loose. Let's go ahead and remove the remainder. So you can see now we have some differential fluid dripping out. So we had our catch can ready to go. Now, if your bolts are as rusty as ours are, plan on replacing them. Don't struggle putting in the old messed up bolts, because you do have to torque these down after, so you won't be able to torque these if they are messed up like ours are. Now with those bolts loose like that up at the top, you can go ahead and use a pry bar or a screwdriver and go ahead and pry that cover out. You see how we get to drain that and keep that cover in place. If you want, go ahead and jam that screwdriver in just to hold it and let that drain out a little bit. Now, with most of that fluid out, we can now go ahead and remove the remaining bolts up top. This bolt here, it's kind of stuck in that bracket. I'm just going to go ahead and pull that bolt out. Usually the bolt will come out separately, but it doesn't want to separate from our bracket, but that's okay. Go ahead and grab that diff cover, pull that off. Now with the differential cover off, the next thing we want to pay attention to is this pin right here, and there is a bolt. This is a long bolt or pin bolt right here, and this goes through this pin, locking it in place. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go around and I'm going to rotate the drive shaft. Now when you pull off your cover, you may not have this pin bolt here readily accessible. It might be on the back side or something like that. So what you're going to do is go ahead and grab that drive shaft, and you can rotate that drive shaft. As you're rotating it, you can see that that pin is moving. So you're going to go ahead and rotate that drive shaft, either left or right. Now we have this in neutral, so we're going to go ahead and rotate this back so that pin, oh, that's good right there, right where we have it. I'm going to use a 5/16 socket here on our ratchet. We want to go ahead and loosen this. Now you're only going to get so far using your 1/4" ratchet before it gets wedged up against the cap end here, so be cautious of that. You may get to a point where you can actually just reach up there and unthread that, or you can switch over to an open-ended wrench, box wrench, whatever you have available. You can actually loosen this using your wrench as well. We prefer to use the box end of the wrench, not the open end on this. You do not want to strip the head of this bolt. Now once you get so far, you should be able to go ahead and grab that bolt and unthread that. There it is right there. Now the next thing we want to do is we need to remove this pin. Now you won't be able to push it forward because it's going to hit the pinion. So let's go ahead and rotate this drive shaft again. Now on the front, on the drive shaft end, you can just grab it with your hands, or you can put a screwdriver in there and rotate this around. And what this is going to expose are your spider gears inside here. Now that pin head that we just seen goes right through here, and it holds these two spider gears in place. And there's also a clip in here we're going to be removing. So what we have to do is we need to remove this pin. We need to find out which way it's going to go. We can go up or down here. So we need to position our carrier unit so that we can get this pin out. If you push it straight down, it's going to hit the bottom of the differential, or up, it's going to hit up top there. So we're going to rotate this so we can go ahead and pull it up through the top, like so. Now when we do this here, the spider gears may fall out of place. It's not critical. We'll be able to pop those in later on, but I'm going to reach inside and push that pin up right through here. You see it coming up. And keep pushing that. If you have to, we can go ahead and rotate this back a little bit. Oh, there we can get our hand in there. There we go. Pull that pin up and out. And there it is. Now with that pin out, we want to be careful now. The spider gears themselves on the top and bottom, if we rotate the wheel itself, not the drive shaft, you can see that the spider gears are moving. In the end, what we need to do is line these up, this one and the upper gear, with the pin that goes through. Now if these fall out, it's a little bit of a project to get them back up and lined up again, but we just want to give you a heads up as what to look for. Now the next step is we need to remove this C-clip right here, and that locks the axle in place. This is the axle end right here. So if you push and pull on the axle from the outside, you can actually see that moving. And you need to get this axle to come in enough. Ooh, want to keep that spider gear in there. We need to get that to come in enough where we can push this clip off. Sometimes you can use a magnet or a screwdriver to go ahead and pop that out, but you have to make sure that the axle comes in far enough for that the clip to come off. Now, I gently used a pry bar. You don't want to chip any of these gears anywhere. You can use a screwdriver. Sometimes just bumping that axle will make that come in far enough. And there it is. That's the C-clip right there. This is the axle key that locks it in place. Once you have this off, we can go ahead and pull the axle from the outboard portion where the brakes are. Now on the outside here, I'm going to go ahead and grab our hub flange here for our axle. Now our next step, we're going to use 2 pry bars. Now sometimes you can pull the axle out and it'll pop right out. Other times you got to use 2 pry bars. You're going to go against the edges of the parking brake, and you're going to pry outward evenly on the axle itself, on the back of the hub. And there it is. Now the axle is released. We're going to go ahead and grab this and gently slide this out. Now the axle is a little bit heavy, so you want to be careful sliding this out. Now go ahead and set this aside. Now here is our outer axle seal, and it comes all the way around to the perimeter itself on the outside edge here. Now if you have a tool like this here, this is going to be a seal puller. And we want to go ahead and try and get this out. Sometimes these work, other times they don't. So our seal puller didn't work right away, so you can use a flathead screwdriver or a chisel tip. And we want to go ahead and bring these edges in of this seal. I'm going to work our way around the perimeter. These have a tendency to get rusted in place. But if we can work the edge away from the steel there, sometimes you can use a slide hammer with a puller, but sometimes you just don't have that tool. Now what you don't want to do is jam your screwdriver in and start reefing around on there, because you can damage the inside surface where the seal is supposed to go in and seal. Now we'll come on back to our seal puller and see if this works for us a little bit. And there we go. You can lose a little bit of oil there. I'm just going to stick a rag there. Now we need to go ahead and get our bearing puller and get that in there and slide that out. Now here we have the bearing. We need to go ahead and pull this bearing out of the axle tube itself. Right behind it is our ABS towing ring setup, and there's a black collar right between the bearing and the ABS unit there. Now I'm using my pick. You can actually might be able to see that black collar moving. So the next step here is critical. We have a tool, a bearing puller, and we need to get these ears behind the bearing and not in front of the plastic collar. So when doing this job, you have to be super careful that when you insert this, that you're able to work this and get it behind the bearings themselves, okay? Then we can slide our washer down. We're going to spin the nut down. Then we're going to use our slide hammer, attach it to this tool, and then we'll go ahead and pop that bearing out. Now I'm just applying some outward pressure on the tool so it does not slip and get behind that plastic ring in there. Now we did tighten down our nut here. That's a 3/4 inch. I'm going to thread in our slide hammer. Make sure it's in there snug. When you're using a slide hammer, always be careful when you're pulling back. Watch out what's behind you, as well as be careful of where your perimeter is standing around it, because once this bearing pops out, it's going to come flying out if it is on a full stroke going out. As you come closer to the edge, you can do more gentle. There it is. Now we're going to go ahead and remove our tool. Now we want to go ahead and clean out the inside of where the new bearing is going to go. Now I'm not going to spray any chemicals in there because we may not be able to get all of it out. We don't want to dilute the new diff fluid when we put that in, so just kind of run your rag inside that. Then the next thing you want to do is check the surface of where the seal is going to go. Ours is a little bit rough, so we're going to use a little bit of 120 grit sandpaper, and just on the outside edge right here, we're going to gently sand that just to make it smooth, clean up any debris. A little bit of surface rust maybe. We don't want to remove any metal, which you probably won't using a 120 grit sandpaper. And once you give that a light sanding, go ahead and take some spray solvent and wipe that out. Just spraying it on the rag and then wipe it out. All right, let's go ahead and install our new bearing. Now we have our bearing here, and I'm going to take some differential lube here, or oil. I'm going to put it on the inside. Now this isn't anything major, but you want to go ahead and kind of pre-lube this here. I get oil inside of the case itself. Go ahead and line that up in there. Next thing, we're going to use a driver, a bearing driver, to go ahead and install this. I just want to make sure that my hands are dry, or at least wiped clean. And we have a bearing driver here. I'm going to go ahead and start to tap this in. You do want to make sure that it is going in evenly. If it's not going in evenly, you do have to pop that back out. Now the face that we're using here covers the outside, and it's larger than the bearing itself. I'm gonna go ahead and swap out the head here and go to a little bit smaller so I can go ahead and drive that bearing in deeper. Now when you're putting the bearing in, there's a ridge here, our little lip, between where the bearing fits into and then where it drops out. The outer is actually a little bit larger so you can put your seal on. So you're going to go ahead and tap that bearing in just till you get to that lip. And we're going to take our diff seal here, and sometimes you can put a thin coat of RTV around where the seal is going to seal up against the axle tube. Now if there's any imperfections, if you have rust or anything like that around the edge here on the inside, sometimes this will help seal that up. Good, line this up. Want to make sure that seal goes in nice and even. And you can hear an audible change once that seal is completely seated. Just run your finger around the perimeter, wipe up any of that RTV, and we literally had nothing there. It was perfect. At this point here, we can go ahead and apply a little bit more of the differential oil on the inside for that bearing. The trick here is that you try not to run this bearing dry on your initial road test. So that's why we can go ahead and add some of that oil there and roll this around. I want to go ahead and remove your paper towels, and we'll go ahead and grab that axle and prep that. Now we went ahead and grabbed our axle and we sprayed down with some solvent around where the bearing goes. You definitely want to inspect the axle and make sure there's no scoring or marking on this here. Ours is okay, everything is nice and clean. There's no rust nuggets or anything like that on there. It's not deformed, so we're safe to install our axle. Go ahead and take that. Now we're gonna go ahead and start to feed this in. Now you wanna support it as you're going in. You don't wanna drag it on that axle seal. You can rest it and then lift it back up. Try and get that in. Now as you get inboard, the axle itself has to go through the inner bearing and into the other spider gear on the inside. So it might take a little bit of wiggling room to get that around. And there it is. Now I want to go ahead and apply some inward pressure on this. And what we want to do is try and get that lined up with the inboard gear. I'm going to go ahead and start to tap this using our mallet. And as you rotate this a little bit, the gears are going to line up for the splines on our axle with the splines on that spider gear inside. And there we go. We can see we have some movement. You see the spider gears moving. So we know that our splines are lined up. Let's go ahead and keep this stable, but tap it in the rest of the way. Okay, with the axle all the way in, we should be able to go ahead and drop in our C-clip on our axle. Now on the inside here, when we tapped in that axle, you can see that that notch is visible right here. That is for your C-clip. Now what you're gonna do, you're gonna put that C-clip on there. Now the trick here is that C-clip will normally just fall off. You're gonna hold it in place, take a pry bar, put it up inside between the two axles, the two axle ends, and push that axle out. Now I'm going to go to the outside axle. I'm going to grab that and just give it a little tug. Now that we have our C-clip in, we need to go ahead and rotate the carrier so that when we drop our pin in through the top, we can put in our horizontal pin to lock it in place. I'm going to go ahead and rotate that drive shaft. It's going to spin us around. Gonna make sure that our spider gears, I just put my finger in there to hold that spider gear. I'm just rotating this like I did before, putting a screwdriver into the U-joint and rotating this. Now at this point here, you can go ahead and take some spray solvent if you want and spray this down and make sure it's nice and clean. You can wipe out the inside of the bottom of the differential, clean out any debris or any metal shavings that might have gathered there over the years. So we can go ahead and do that next. All right, the inside of our diff is nice and clean. Take your pin, lower that down inside. I'm gonna make sure that the hole is gonna line up. Here it is. I went ahead and cleaned our pin here. I'm gonna slide that in. Get that started. I'm going to thread that in as far as I can by hand. Snug that down. Now, if you have the ability to do so, you want to go ahead and torque that cross pin bolt to 18 foot-pounds. Or nice and tight with your 1/4-inch ratchet. Now what I want to do is we're going to do one more cleaning on this. I'm going to go ahead and rotate this. Going to go ahead and spray out inside the spider gear area. And rotate this, let that fluid dump out. Wipe this out. And once you have your differential cleaned out on the inside, the next step you want to do is we're going to clean the face where the diff cover is going to get bolted to. So let's go ahead and do that next. We want a nice clean surface, but we don't want to remove any metal. So don't use anything super abrasive where you can grind away the metal. We just want to clean the rust off. Continue this right up around the top, and then we'll spray down with some solvent and clean it up. Now, obviously, you've seen that we've done multiple cleanings here, which is okay. You definitely want to make sure that you have cleaned everything multiple times because you don't want to have debris left in here when you reassemble. You can go ahead and rotate, spinning that drive shaft, clean that ring gear, clean out inside the carrier, wipe it all out. Okay, next we want to go ahead and clean up our differential cover and get that ready for installation. You can go ahead and chase it with a razor blade and then spray it down with some solvent, wipe it off. We want a nice flat surface just like we did on the differential. Now you can do one of two things here. You can actually get a gasket for it if you want. We like to use an RTV, which tend to be the most common and easiest to go ahead and use. You know, lay down a bead. Now we're not going to leave it big and gloppy like this here. We're going to go ahead and smear it to give it a nice even coat. Once we have that spread on there, we're going to go ahead and let it set for about 5 minutes. You want that coat to be even all the way around. Going to wait for this to get good and tacky. Now that we've let the RTV set up a little bit, you want to go ahead and lift up the cover. Make sure that the raised portion covers your ring gear. It obviously won't fit the other way. I'm going to go ahead and push this up and line this up. We did source replacement bolts for our diff cover as ours were rusted beyond identification. So I'm going to go ahead and get all these started. In our case, the only one we're not replacing is this one that is attached to the brake line bracket. We do want to line that up and get that started. Now that we have all of our bolts started, let's go ahead and snug them down. Now we'll go ahead and torque these down to 22 foot-pounds. like to just double check these. And you can see here, there's just a minimal amount of the RTV squeezing out. So we had the perfect amount of RTV set on there when we smeared that on. And I'm just gonna check these 3 on the top one more time. Okay. Nope, here we have our fill plug. Use your 3/8 ratchet and loosen or remove this plug. Just gonna wipe up around that. Now when you remove your fill plug here, ours has a gasket on it. Now if you had diff fluid leaking out of here, you want to go ahead and replace that gasket. Absolute worst case, if you're stuck, go ahead and put a thin coat of RTV around there, put it in and seal it until you get a chance to go ahead and replace that gasket. Now that we've given enough time for our differential seal to cure up here, I'm gonna go ahead and start to add our differential oil. You wanna go ahead and use the appropriate differential oil. I'm gonna put this in. I'm gonna go ahead and start to fill this. I'm going to squeeze that fluid into that. Now our goal here is to go ahead and fill up the differential until it starts to come out on the fill hole here. So this might take a little bit of time. Now usually these differentials can take 2 to 2.5 of these containers. You want to check with the manufacturer specs to find out what your particular model requires. Switch over to our second one here. And at this point here, we do have a little bit of gear oil coming out. I'm just going to give this a quick little wipe. I want to make sure that we are full, so I'm going to continue to squeeze some more in there. Now when you see the differential oil coming out like this here, go ahead and take your pinky, the flat section here, put it in, should just be touching differential oil. Now I'm only getting differential oil on the threads. If I put my pinky in and then bend it and put it down, I'm not getting differential oil on my pinky. You should be able to have that oil just coming right out of that. So we're getting a false reading on our level. So let's go ahead and continue doing this. Now we've now gone through 2 of these containers. We're still not full yet. You should be able to touch that differential oil just flush with this hole here. And we just have it on the threads. So I'm going to move on to our 3rd bottle and go ahead and top this off. And at this point here, we have a steady, constant stream of that gear oil coming out. We don't have to check that. At this point here, we know that it's filled up. Go ahead and put your fill plug in. I'm going to go ahead and snug that down. You do want to go ahead and make sure that it's good and snug. Be sure to clean up the rear diff using some spray solvent. Now ideally, what you want to do is after you're all set here, go ahead and install your driver's side wheel or the passenger side wheel, whichever one you had to replace those components on. You want to go ahead and put the jack under either side, and you want to tip the differential towards the side that you just replaced. We did the driver's side, so you want to jack up the passenger side so that this differential oil runs down this tube, and then you want to go ahead and rotate that wheel. So the vehicle's still going to be off the ground. You're just going to go ahead and jack up this side here, whether this side is on the jack stands or whichever. Tilt it up, let this oil run down to that tube, and then manually rotate that wheel. Make sure that bearing and everything is completely soaked in the differential oil. Drop it down to the ground and go ahead and go for road test. Go ahead and install your brake rotor. Push that on. Now what I like to do is take a lug nut, position one of the studs at 6 o'clock, and go ahead and spin on a lug nut. And that's going to keep our rotor nice and tight right up onto that axle. It's going to make it easier for us to go ahead and install our brake caliper next. Go ahead and grab your brake caliper. I'm going to remove our support tool, spin this around. And we do want to make sure that our brake pads are spread apart enough here. Go ahead and slide your brake pads over the rotor. Let's go ahead and install our bolts on the back side. I'm going to go ahead and line up my upper bolt here first. Get that upper bolt started. I'm going to go ahead and thread that in quite a ways. I'm not going to tighten that down yet, but I do want to make sure that it is cut pretty good. And then go ahead and install the bottom. I might have to slide that bracket out a little bit to line that up. I'm going to use my ratchet. I'll go ahead and snug them down. Our next step, you want to go ahead and torque these down to 100 foot-pounds. At this point here, we can now go ahead and install our wheel. Go ahead and grab that wheel, line it up, set that in place. We're going to start all of our lug nuts by hand, and once they're all started, we're going to go ahead and snug them down. In our case, we are missing one lug nut. Obviously, you probably have all of yours. Install them all, and we're going to snug them down gently in a crisscross pattern. Now we're going to torque down our lug nuts to 103 foot-pounds. You want to do this in a crisscross pattern. In our particular case, we're missing a lug nut here, but you would go ahead and torque that down. Take your center cap, take the leg here, and you want to line that up with the spot right here in the wheel. Once you have your wheel on, go ahead and take it for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.